Alrighty, everybody. Hey, thank you all for being here tonight. I'm so excited for our workshop this evening. My name is Garrett Mintz. I'm the founder of Ambition in Motion. I'm here with Emilio Lorenzo. We are here to talk about, oops, my audio keeps sneaking on me. But I'm so excited to begin this workshop. If you are watching the recording of this right now, you can fast forward 9 minutes. We're going to get started at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But I'm so excited to have Emilio Lorenzo here. We are here to talk about professional interviews and how you can really make the most out of that. So just real quick, Emilio, could you just introduce yourself and share with us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So as Gary mentioned, my name is Emilio Lorenzo. I'm the Associate Director of Employee Relations for Nova Southeastern University. I've spent a little bit over 8 years in the career development field. I started as a full-time career advisor, moved on to managing large and small teams as overseeing advisement, transitioned to employee relations over the last 2 years. But one of my biggest things is not only motivating teams to success, but finding out different avenues to get people to their goals. And so hopefully tonight I can share some insights with your audience on how to do that themselves and be able to clear some paths, because I think everything in terms of discussion is about a perspective, and the more you dialogue with others, you create perspective on your own job search, your own goals, and similar kind of approaches that people have taken.
That makes a lot of sense. That's really, really cool. I'm really excited for you to share your message with our audience. So one thing that we were talking about right before we went live was something that you were talking about that I thought was fascinating. We were talking about the love languages on teams. And in management, what you observed was that people have their own love language in terms of how they want to be managed. I'd love if you could share your insight on that. I think it's really fascinating. By the way, any students that are jumping in now, we're going to get started in like 6.5 minutes. So Emilio and I are just going to chat real quick as we wait for everybody to jump into the live stream. But yeah, Emilio, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so as I was mentioning, Garrett, I've managed small and large teams, and one thing I noticed when managing large teams is how even when you're giving feedback to your team, you need to understand the individual behind it, how they want to be recognized, how they want to be motivated. People use that phrase, challenge and support. That's great. And that's the big, broad term of it all. But for each individual, you got to get to know them using your listening skills to figure out how is it that they want to hear this message? Because I think sometimes managers get apprehensive. They're like, well, I don't know if I want to give this person this negative feedback. They're going to take it the wrong way. When to me, negative feedback isn't negative feedback. It's areas to grow, to improve. How is that person that is in an entry-level position going to rise up to become a manager or grow within the organization if you're not giving them that honest feedback? However, you got to give that honest feedback in a way where they take it, they apply it, but you yourself are doing it in a way that they want to hear it. And so it's not necessarily the feedback, but it's the delivery of that feedback. And so we were talking about love languages and how that's a really popular assessment. I feel that there's love languages in management and how each individual really has a certain particular approach or how they want to receive feedback, motivations. Because as a manager, I think not only do you want to give feedback, but you almost want to provide that individual a path to where they're going to grow, where they're going to move up from. And I think when I'm giving that negative feedback and I'm telling them, hey, look, this project could have gone better. Here are things that you want to work on. I'm always careful with who I'm working with. And so some individuals want the nitty gritties. What was it in that project that I struggled with? And so I zero in on that. I'm like, look, when you were working on X, Y, and Z, I noticed that this wasn't phrased right, or the document wasn't exactly what I was looking for. And I tell them what that was or those issues were. But then I provide them the tools. Here's how we're going to fix that. Here's how we're going to move from that. Because I don't stay on the negative. I really am talking about, I'm giving you this feedback so that the next project, you're going to be able to soar. You're going to be able to do awesome. And so I give them that feedback. But in turn, I flip it on them. I'm like, look, maybe I didn't explain the project correctly, or did I give you all the tools you needed to be successful? Was I available for you when you had questions for this project? So at one point, I throw it onto them and provide an avenue. Hey, I'm not just giving you feedback. I want you to give me feedback, because the next time we work on this project, I want both of us to be successful. Me managing you and you providing that project of need. And so I create a dialogue where it's constructive. It's not just about the things that went wrong. It's like, how can we improve in the whole process? It's not just you coming in one way street. We both need to be working in harmony. And where is it that maybe that fell through?
Yeah, that's really cool. That makes a lot of sense. One thing that I've observed, at least on this kind of topic, is with work orientation, which is how you view your work. So kind of talking about like that love language for the workplace and like people wanting to be managed in certain ways. I think that's 100% true. I know what we've observed with work orientation, it's how you view your work. So imagine like a triangle. So imagine like the top is job, the bottom left is career, the bottom right is calling. And depending on how you view your work. So if you view your work as a job, that means your focus is on work-life balance. Or if you view your work as a career, that means your focus is on professional growth. Or if you view your work as a calling, that means your focus is on how does your personal and professional mission align. What I've observed is that if you view your work, whichever way you view your work, and by the way, it's a spectrum, so it's fluid, it can change throughout your life. So if you decide, hey, I want to start a family, that can affect your work orientation. Or, hey, my company is relocating me, that can affect your work orientation. It can change for any reason or any reason at all, or just your stage in life. But wherever your work orientation is right now, what we've identified is that things that like work towards achieving goals that are in that realm are significantly more motivating. So for example, if I'm very career motivated, if you were to lay out like, hey, in 3 months, we're going to have a conversation. And at that conversation, we're going to talk about maybe a new skill or a promotion or transitioning to a new kind of task so you can build a new skill to your repertoire. But the point is that would be really motivating to a very career-oriented person, but not very motivating to a very job-oriented or calling-motivated person. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. I think it's an understanding. And I think that's when you start managing a new team, especially if you're the new person, the new manager on the block, and there's some individuals on that team that have been there for a while. I think those first initial one-on-one meetings is finding out what's important to them, what's their passion, what's their long-term goals, and making the space comfortable that their long-term goals may not be staying in that organization for 5 to 10 years. And so it's helping them understand so that when you're building them up or motivating to new projects, you can help them see that even if that project is in a setting where they see themselves, it's developing a skill they're going to need in that next step in their chapter. And so, but it's all about, as a manager, pulling that out. Some individuals are going to be more introverted or not willing to share some information, or a little bit guarded. Like, should I be telling my manager that I want to leave this to go into somewhere else? But I think the more successful managers and the more successful teams have that transparent, open communication. It's not affecting their current job. They're being honest, transparent, and they're probably going to loop you in when they do job search, so your organization isn't put in a very difficult spot when they go off and leave.
That's a really interesting point. That's extremely fascinating because, one, it's kind of counterintuitive to what we're talking about today in terms of like preparing for the professional interview, which is how do I make a positive impression so then they give me that shot. But I think it's a very smart and realistic point that you're making, because at the end of the day, this isn't the 50s, 60s, and 70s anymore. We're not going to spend our entire professional careers at one company. Realistically, that's not happening. But I feel so often that we have this weird, we want to put on this like fake self that like that might happen, but in reality, that's the statistics show it's not going to happen. The likelihood is very low. And I think having a company that's open and honest about that, saying like, hey, I understand that in 5-10 years you may not be with us anymore, but we want to put you in the best position so then when you go and move on to that next thing, that you're prepared. And then if you decide to come back to us, we'd love to have you with open arms. And I think that is like, companies that do that are the ones that thrive in the future. What do you think?
Absolutely, especially with Gen Z population today. I mean, you look at the tendencies, you meant 60s, 70s, 80s, it was a whole different generation that we live today. And most individuals, especially Gen Z, they don't want to stay stagnant in one place. They want to constantly grow. They want something new. But I think it's up to the managers and leadership to approach them, because usually we're talking about interviews today. As a new employee, you're not going to be your first week, be like, hey, by the way, 3 years, I'm out of here. So I think it's important that as a manager, you create that culture, that open environment where people feel comfortable in telling you, not that they plan on leaving, but they want to grow in areas and develop, and their 5 to 10 year plan may not align with your own 5 to 10 year plan for them.
I love that. Well, hey, it is 8 o'clock, so let's get started. Students, thank you all for being here this evening. I'm so excited. I'm so happy, so grateful you all could be here tonight. My name is Garrett Mintz. I'm the founder of Ambition in Motion. And we are now already pretty much halfway through the semester. This is crazy how fast this is going on. So hopefully you've already had your first conversation with your mentor, potentially already had your second conversation with your mentor. If you've not had one yet, get on it, reach out. You've got nothing to lose. Your mentor wants to give you this insight. Take advantage of it. This workshop is going to be about 45 minutes long with another 15 minutes for Q&A at the very end. If you've got any questions, please post them in the comment section. In fact, if you've got any comments or at all, that's how we get your attendance. So post it in the comment section. We want to know that you're here. Get active, get participant with this workshop. I'm so excited. Now, for the focus of the workshop this evening, we're going to be talking about professional interviews and ways that you can crush it. Our guest tonight is Emilio Lorenzo. I'm going to interview him in just a moment. But tonight, when we're talking about professional interviews, I want you to think about being intentional. I want you to think about being intentional. And this, by the way, goes beyond just the interviews. It goes with what you're doing in your life and on a day-to-day basis. Are you choosing your actions, your tasks in an intentional way? And are you going about making sure that you are really remembering the things that you're doing and reinforcing the things that you're doing? And if not, how can you go about being intentional within your life? So I want to ask you a really quick question before we get started, and just write your answer in the comment section. But when it comes to the interview, how do you want people to feel about you? So to put in other words, what feeling are you trying to convey about yourself when it comes to the interview? Like, when you go into that interview, what is a story that you tell yourself? For when you go into that interview, that's how you want them to feel about you. What is that? Write it in the comment section. Write it in how you want them to feel about you. Because one, if you don't have an intention, I mean, you're setting yourself up for failure. I mean, ultimately, if you don't have an idea of how you want people to perceive you in this experience, it's going to be very difficult for them to actually perceive you that way. If you come in like, hey, I'm an open book, whatever, it could go in any direction, potentially not in the direction you want to go. But if you say, hey, I want people to perceive me as confident or competent, or that I am eager to learn, or that I'm an open book, or that I'm somebody that's hungry and persistent, like how do you want them to perceive you? Write in the comment section. I'd love to learn. So Abram, you mentioned that you want people to perceive you as friendly, that people want to work with somebody like yourself. That's great. Abby, you mentioned that you want the interview to know that you're a likable, open, and a talkative person. Jeffrey, excited about the job. Awesome. Anya, you said you want people to feel like you're comfortable, you want people to feel like you have potential. I know I'm rather green, and so having potential and dedication is key. You're so right. You're so on it. Thomas, you want people to feel comfortable being around you, but also feel confident in that you can do whichever job you're interviewing for. Emily, you hope they receive you as intelligent, passionate, and easygoing. Sammy, you're trying to convey that. Oh wow, that jump. You're trying to convey that you're passionate about the work being done and that you're ready and excited to learn. Jennifer, you want to be perceived as eager and willingness to learn. I love it. Win, that you're a team player. That's fantastic. Maurice, to feel that you've got this drive. Max, you want to appear both dedicated and easygoing. Nella, you want people to perceive me as passionate. I love it. Haley, that you're an excited person for the job. Leah, that's amazing. Everybody, thank you so much. Haley, Ashley, Lizzie, Eric, Nicole, Miriam, Jillian, Rachel, Rushi, thank you all for sharing. Mila, your comments are amazing. I see them. They're fantastic. Susan, that's excellent. Tim, amazing. So I love this participation. I love what we're getting right now. That is fantastic. Thank you all for sharing. We're going to go into the interview in just a moment, or into how to prepare for the interview in just a moment. But I wanted to go over the 3 keys for success in this program. And this is something we've covered in our last 2 workshops, but they are so important. The 3 keys to success in this program, really in anything in life, is your strategy, your story, and your state. Now, I said that in reverse order of importance. So your state, what is that? Your state is your physical body. Literally, what is your physical body like? Are you in a state not conducive for successfulness? Are you someone that is, tired, exhausted, hungover, frustrated, mad, sad, jealous, angry, whatever? Are you someone that's not coming into a scenario in a state conducive for being successful? I mean, could you imagine going into an interview hungover? Do you think that any type of words that you use is going to convey that you are a successful person for this role? Absolutely not. I mean, at the end of the day, your body language, your physical body is something that's so vital to somebody perceiving you and reading your body language. And if you're not doing a good job of conveying it, it means you've got bad vibes. If you've ever been around someone that you thought was like, oh man, that person's creepy, or that person's got bad vibes, that person's got bad energy, almost always it's that they've got bad body language. So fortunately, what you can do is you can get yourself into a state conducive for being successful, because your emotions drive your emotions. So what I want you to do right now is I want you to get up and I want you to dance. I want you to shake it out. I want you to get loose. I want you to shimmy. I want you to scream at the top of your lungs. On the count of 3, I want you to scream as loud as you possibly can. 1, 2, 3. Yeah! Just let it loose. Let it out. Let it go. Get that blood pumping, because when you get your blood pumping, you're releasing endorphins in your brain. You're getting that blood flowing. You're getting yourself into a state conducive for retaining information. We got a lot of information tonight. We've got a great guest speaker, and I want you to be in a state ready for being knowledgeable and getting information. So do it. Shake it out. This is not a popularity contest. I don't care if you wake up your neighbor. I don't care if people are looking at you thinking you're weird, because at the end of the day, if you are getting yourself in the best possible position for being successful in retaining the information from this workshop, then that's the only thing that matters. Like, someone's not going to remember that you danced and shook it out and screamed at the top of your lungs for 30 seconds at one point one night on a random Tuesday. But if you take this knowledge that Emilio and I have to share with you this evening, and you end up applying it to help you land that job, and it ends up sticking with you, that can mean the world. That can stick with you for the rest of your life. What do you have to lose? So that's your state. Hopefully that got you a little amped up. Hopefully that got your energy moving, your blood pumping. The second key is your story. What is the story you tell yourself for why you're going to be successful? So back to that whole, what is the intention I want to set from this interview? How do I want people to feel about me in the interview? That's 100% relevant for this. I mean, just like a professional athlete will play and visualize what success looks like when the ball is going, when the clock's counting down, 3, 2, 1, drill the final shot. Just like that, you can visualize, what is the interview going to go like? What is the feeling that you are going to convey in the interview? If you can set an intention for what you want to accomplish, your likelihood of actually achieving that goal is substantially higher than if you don't set a goal whatsoever. Don't think your natural personality is going to come out in the interview. Sometimes it doesn't. But if you set an intention that it will, you are much more likely, much more inclined subconsciously to convey that in the interview. So that is your story. And the last part is your strategy. Those are the things that you do on a regular basis to get yourself into a position to be successful. So maybe you go into an interview and it doesn't go the way you want it to. Try something different. Maybe wear different clothes. Maybe come with different questions. Maybe come with different notes. Whatever it is, the more strategies you try, the more likely you are to uncover what is your success formula for yourself. But it comes with the state, and it comes with the story first. Because if you've got a bad state and you've got a bad story, it doesn't matter how many strategies you try. But if you've got a great state, you've got a great story, and then you're trying a bunch of different strategies, I promise you, you will stumble across the correct answer. Now, when it comes to strategies, it's all about the routine. So what are the things that you do on a regular basis to get yourself better equipped? What habits do you get started that get you better equipped to be successful at something? So from this workshop, your deliverable and the habit that I want you to get into is I want you to be more intentional and conscientious about the things that you learn on a regular basis. So I want you to find a new accountability partner, not somebody from the previous 2 workshops, but a new accountability partner. And I want you to share with them 3 things that you learned this past week and 1 thing that you've done to get closer to landing that job or internship. In fact, I'd love if you could share with us something that you've learned this past week and something that you've done to help you get yourself closer to landing a job or internship in the comment section. Write it down now. But in terms of setting up this routine, I want you to find an accountability partner, take a picture of that with that person. And by the way, I apologize for our technical difficulties on our end. Our upload button was not working. So you can send that picture to either myself or Sydney, and we will count that for you on our end, but we'll love to see it. Alternatively, you can post the 3 things that you've learned on LinkedIn. Tag us, tag Ambition in Motion, tag me. It's okay, it's all right. I want you to do it because I want to learn what you're doing. That's another way that we'll count it. But I want to learn, what is something that you've learned this past week? What is something that you've done to help get yourself closer to landing that job or that internship? Right in the comment section. Now, one thing that I want to mention before we jump into our workshop this evening with our guest speaker, Emilio Lorenzo, is I want to talk about the referral program. So we have already started opening up signups for next semester. And here's a cool thing that we are doing. And I would love to have your help with encouraging more students from your chapter to get involved and get signed up. If you refer 3 students to sign up for the program next semester, your deposit cut in half. If you refer 6 or more students to sign up for the program next semester, you don't even have to pay a deposit. You're automatically good to go and in for the program. I just want to be able to expose students to this opportunity, give them opportunity to connect, obviously, with their mentor, with our guest speakers, with this content, and be a part of this community. And I would love your help to get people and students involved. So if you could share this with your peers in your chapter and help encourage them to sign up, I would greatly appreciate it. That would be amazing. So let's dive in. Let's jump in right now. Oh, sorry. One other thing that I was hoping that you could do, and that is if you're really enjoying your experience right now in the program, I was hoping that you could do me a massive favor. Could you make a 30 to 60-second video on your phone of you talking into it, talking about how you've been meeting with your mentor, how you've been going to the workshops, and the things that you've really enjoyed with the program? That would mean a ton to me. It would really make a difference, and I feel like it would really help encourage other students that are on the fence about signing up to sign up and get involved. If you could do that and upload it to the Drive and share it with me, that would be amazing. Much appreciated. So let's dive into our guest speaker this evening. So our guest speaker is Emilio Lorenzo. Emilio is the Associate Director of Employer Relations at Nova Southeastern University. He joined the Office of Career Development as a graduate assistant career advisor in July 2012. He graduated with a Master of Science in College Student Affairs with a concentration on conflict analysis and resolution from Nova Southeastern University and a Bachelor of Science in Sociology and International Relations from Florida International University. Emilio became a full-time advisor with the Office of Career Development in June of 2013. In September of 2015, he was promoted to the Assistant Director of Career Advisement at Nova Southeastern. As of February 2018, Emilio has served as the Associate Director of Employer Relations. In his role, he is always developing new and unique ways to have employers and students engage with one another, including case competitions, networking events, and other innovative programs. He also develops a strategic plan in which to promote employers' brand awareness on campus while ensuring students have opportunities through internships that enhance their academic experience. Emilio also oversees the Business School Career Office and is always working to create new partnerships to provide the best outcomes for students' own professional development. Emilio, thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you, Garrett. That was a great introduction. I haven't heard my biography in a while, so that was great. Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, of course. So for tonight's workshop, we're talking about the interview, but I think before we go into it, I want to talk about mentorship and really about the people that are in your network, because I think so often we forget that 70% of all job offers go to somebody who knows somebody at that company.
Absolutely.
So how often have you had people that are in your network and maybe they've fallen out of touch? And really, I guess the question I had for you is what suggestions do you have for students to keep their network in touch, even if you haven't spoken with them for a few months or even a few years?
Yeah, well, it's actually a really important question because how I got my foot in the door as a career advisor really started with my network. I started doing informational interviews with different folks in career development and higher education. It was a way that I helped to explore if that's a good fit for me. And so those type of connections are people that provided me insights when I went through the interview process. And even afterwards, where I wasn't working in their same organization, we stayed connected through LinkedIn. We stayed connected through phone, email, text messages at times. Really, as times change, adapting to what works best for us. We're both, or anyone that have been a mentor, because I've had various, we've stayed in contact in a variety of different ways. Sometimes it's as simple as a Facebook message, LinkedIn message, but I think it's intentional. I think, every few months, I'm always thinking, you know what, I haven't heard from my former manager. I want to see how they're doing. And either they or myself were reaching out, but it needs to be intentional because life gets a little crazy, your work, your personal life, so many things can fall off. And I think it's important to maintain that bridge because a network is important, but it's really a bridge. And if you don't maintain it, it's going to fall through. If you don't contact someone that's a mentor for 8 years, it's going to be hard to have that same type of relationship or ask for guidance because you haven't heard from me in 8 years. And the first thing I'm doing is, hey, I need some guidance, buddy. And so I think it's really important to maintain that network, whether it's through social media, email, phone, or if they're in the area or they're visiting, go and grab a cup of coffee, take 10 minutes to kind of spend some time with that individual, giving them an update of what's going on in your life, especially if it's something that you need their guidance or insight on.
Yeah, I love that. That makes a lot of sense. And I think you touched on two really good points in that statement there. One, you talked about the importance of being genuine and reaching out with intentionality, because if you're reaching out 2-3 years later or 8 years later, and you're only reaching out because you need something from them, that doesn't make somebody feel very good. I mean, that just makes you feel very transactional. It makes you feel like, hey, this only person only reaches out to me when he or she needs something. Like, people don't want to stay in touch with somebody like that. I mean, ultimately, you want to be able to build a strong relationship with somebody. So then when if God forbid you need something, you can go to them and reach out. And then the other key thing that I really like that you talk about, and one thing that we actually have in our tips and templates tab, and in students for your dashboard, when you go into tips and templates, we have a network update template. That's something that I use every 3 months. Every 3 months, speaking of which, I need to send one out sometime in the next week. To my network, I have a list of people. I mean, it's a couple hundred people long, but I send that email to them every 3 months to give them an update about what's going on in my world. I talk about what I've worked on over the last 3 months, what I'm working towards over the next, 3 months, and things that I'm like, people that I'm trying to connect with. And if they have any advice, suggestions, recommendations, or anything, I love to learn it. And just overall, even if they don't respond, I'm just glad that I'm able to update them. And that's just essentially it. What do you think about that, Emilio?
I think that's a great plan. I think, again, it's a structured intention. And I think anytime you have a process or a structure to it, it's going to be hard for things to slip through the cracks. And so I think it gives them a nice little update and a way to connect. I think it's also not being afraid to be spontaneous, having that structure, but for example, I've gone to conference and I see something that reminds me of my old boss or my old mentor, and I send them a quick picture and I'm like, hey, remember that time we presented there? It's those little moments where I'm not asking for anything back. It's just like, hey, I remember our experiences or this time where I learned so much. I remember, every now and then as professionals, we go through new challenges and new things that we're trying to overcome. And, sometimes I reach back out to my mentors and I'm like, hey, I pulled off this presentation with this organization today. I kept going back to what you taught me of X, Y, and Z. Thank you so much for always giving me those great insights. Those little recognitions. I mean, everyone loves getting a compliment, but it's also when that compliment, you mentioned authenticity, when it's authentic and it's coming from you and they're like, wow, like, this person was part of my management tree or guidance. And even to this day, they're remembering me. That means a lot to people. And you never know what that person's going through that day or having a rough week, or just they may have thought about you, but were afraid to, I don't want to reach out. They're probably, going through their life stuff. I think it's important to have that structure, but not being afraid to be spontaneous. If you're thinking about that person, send them something, send them an email, send them a text message, a LinkedIn message. I think it's going to go a long way for you continuing that strong bond with that individual.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because Abby has the question. She asked, is it weird if you talk about the same thing with them every X months? I would say, Abby, I don't think that's weird at all. I think as long as you're making progress on whatever that thing is, I believe that ultimately when it comes to mentor experiences and relationships and the conversations that you have with people, it's super important that you're making progress with them, because ultimately they're going to feel like their advice is falling on deaf ears if you are not making progress. But it doesn't mean that, well, I think on the flip side, I often see people underplay the progress they've made. I think they don't recognize how much progress they've actually made, and they don't give themselves enough credit. So I think when it comes to that mentor relationship, share with them the little things that you've had, the little wins that you've had, because it's important. People like hearing about that. I don't know. What do you think, Emilio?
You're right on the track. And it's something that's going to be a theme of tonight, especially with interviews, the power of storytelling. Yeah, it may seem stagnant if you're keeping it in generalities. Like, yeah, things are going great at work. I'm being challenged in new ways, but you're not getting into the specifics. Like, for example, Gary, if you would ask me that, go ahead and be like, yeah, Gary, I have been challenged in new ways. For example, last week I had to take a new presentation. You see, I'm getting into the nitty gritty details, and it's like, it's coming to life. I'm painting a picture for that individual as to what's going on. Because even if you're checking in 3 months and the themes are the same, the specifics within those themes have a lot of variety in terms of the stories that you could provide.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's really cool. That's a really good point. That's a really good transition into the topic of this evening, and that is interviews. So what are things that you absolutely should do during an interview? And I think on a more important level, what are things you absolutely should not do during the interview?
Yeah. Well, the do's, definitely storytell. Anyone could go into an interview, and I'm a good talker. I can go into an interview and say things that I know they want to hear. I'm a great communicator. I'm a good critical thinking. Oh, I'm adaptable. Oh, I want to work for your organization. I'm a great fit for your culture. All these great things that sound great, but they backed up with examples. And if you say, oh, you want to work for us? Well, why? And you need to tie that into your own values, your own excitement, the nature of the work. Also, if you're saying, I have all these skills that align with what you're looking for, how is that? How are you connecting the dots for them? So if you say, I'm a great communicator, are you giving a direct example of where you've used communication skills in a setting that you could see how it could translate over into this job? And examples in storytelling, everyone in this world has a favorite Netflix show, movie. We're drawn towards images, viewing, putting a picture to it. And so when you can take generalities and put it into specific terms, that's a key skill needed in interviews. Storytelling, examples. I think I mentioned connecting the dots. So going into interviews, you need to have a good handle as to what this job entails, because throughout that interview, besides storytelling, you need to make sure that you're getting a message across that, hey, I can handle the nature of the work associated with this job. Here's how I can add value to this job. And I understand not only the skills you need, but how it's going to be applied within this setting, especially if you're transitioning from one job to another. In your mind and in your, what you know about yourself, you're like, I know I can do that job, and all the skills I'm doing in this job, even though it's not in the same setting, are going to translate over. But it's like back in math in junior high, when they're like, you got to show your work. You're going to have to show your work when you're going into those interviews. Don't just expect that they're going to know how those skills you did in a different setting are going to translate over. Explain it to them, connect the dots for them, give those real life examples, those tangible transition of how that's going to transition over into this new setting.
Yeah.
Showing excitement. You can see me on camera right now. I'm one of these people that likes to smile, get excited. Whether you're doing a phone interview, in-person interview, Skype interview, you got to show excitement. I know I mentioned phone interviews. They're like, well, why should I smile in a phone interview? You can pick up on energy. And if you're standing up during your phone interview, you are smiling during your phone interview, yeah, that person doesn't know you're standing up and smiling, but it's going to come across in your energy. And just in that exercise you start off, Gary, where you got us all excited and pumped up, I think that's really important in those interviews to have that same emotion, even if you don't have a face-to-face contact. But eye contact is important if you are in person. Excitement, not overusing your hands. I'm one of these people, I'm Hispanic and I love using my hands. Sometimes it looks like I'm an orchestra conductor when I'm talking. And so I need to be careful to use my hand and emotions with my body cues in a strategic way when I want to emphasize a point, when I want to really bring something to life for the individual. Noticing your tone. You're probably noticing as I'm talking to you, my tone has gone up and down, has really exemplified in certain areas. It's because if I talk in a monotone like this the entire time, you're going to lose the attention of the audience. So storytelling, giving examples, using that excitement within your voice, eye contact, being able to connect the dots. I think those are the key things you really want to bring in play for an interview. And doing your research on the company. One of the first questions they ask you is, why are you interested in us? What have you heard about us? You need to be able to be specific. And the more you know about that organization, the more that they're buying into, hey, this person really wants to work for us or knows what we're about. And it's going to be a lot easier for you to connect the dots as to not only your fit in terms of the nature of the work, but your fit in terms of the values and culture based on the research that you've had on the company. Now, some don'ts, definitely not talking about salary. You want to wait unless they're asking you the question at the end. That's not something you want to bring up. It's like on the first day telling the person, I want to love you and want to have kids. It's like, whoa, let's fill out, make sure we're a good match first. And so I think it's important that you're kind of giving some details and avoiding kind of some of things within the salary. And I think some of the things that I mentioned on the don'ts, you can go on the reverse side. The do's can go on reverse side for the don'ts. So if you go in an interview and you're talking in generalities, you're not giving me examples, there's no reason I'm going to bring you to that next round or make you an offer, because anyone could tell me these generic things about us. Or I could tell that you haven't done your homework and you're tiptoeing around my questions as to why are you interested in us. Sometimes, and in this university, I'm in part of a lot of interviews, I sometimes zero in, yeah, but what specifically about our university interests you? What specifically about our company is drawing you in? And at that point, that person has two options. Be honest that you haven't done your research, or give me a straightforward answer. And so I think in those type of scenarios, that's really what I want to see in the interview. Examples, connecting the dots, really kind of making sure that this person has a handle on the job and our culture and the company, and really putting it together in a way where I can cohesively understand what you're trying to tell me in your message.
Yeah, so I loved a lot of what you just said. So one, when it comes to communication, I believe the statistic is 55% of your communication is via your body language. 38% is from your vocal intonation, so the way that your tonality is changing. And then only 7% of your communication is actually the words that you say. So that vocal intonation, even on the phone, is crucial to making that impact, because it's not going to be about the actual words that you say that's going to get you the next opportunity. It's going to be how you say it. I don't know if your mom ever told you, it's not about what you say, it's how you say it. It is so about how you say it. The other thing that I love that you talk about in terms of what not to do was to talk about salary, or really, I think any component of the job in terms of like vacation time or like flexible working conditions, or like, can I work from home? Like those are things that you don't ask in the interview process, because I believe it's a transition of leverage. When a company posts a job itself, they're being vulnerable. They're saying, hey, I'm giving you the leverage to say, hey, we're needing to fill this position. But the moment that you apply is the moment that you give them back the leverage, because now they've got the leverage. They're like, okay, cool, you're interested, great, I'm going to interview you. They still have the leverage, but the moment they offer you the job offer, that's when you have that leverage reclaimed. That's when you can start talking about salary negotiations. That's when you can start talking about flexible work hours. That's when you can start negotiating, because they gave you the offer, not somebody else. But if you're already talking about the salary in the interview itself and you haven't gotten an offer yet, you are really putting yourself at a massive disadvantage.
Absolutely. I mean, at that point, they've eliminated other candidates. They've identified that you could add the most value. So at that point, they want to bring you on. And so it's just crossing the T's and dotting the I's in terms of, does the salary match? Do the benefits match? Hey, I already had a planned vacation to go to Europe in June. Am I still able to take that? These type of things can be discussed, but you're at the point where we want you, and we could tell you want us, how can we make this work? And sometimes you get through salary negotiation and it might not be a good fit, but at the very least, you like what they're saying in terms of the opportunity. They like what you're saying in terms of your fit. Now, at the end, you negotiate and see, can we match up in terms of what my needs are in terms of benefits and salary reimbursements?
Yeah. And then the other big thing that you talked about was, well, I think two things you mentioned on that. So the one thing you talked about was research. Do your background research. I think one thing you can do is go to look at current events, new things that are going on. Let's say if a company just laid off like all the employees at this one plant, and you're coming in the interview, you can say, hey, I noticed that XYZ plant had everybody laid off. I was wondering how that is impacting the future of work at this company. And I think you can be inquisitive about it and not be offensive, because maybe they might turn around and say, well, good, I'm glad that you did your research. We're actually about to open up this new plant in this new city, and that's going to be even bigger and be able to house more people. And that's something that we're working towards in the future. Or we determined that this product model was obsolete, but we're working towards this thing. By doing your research, it shows that you're inquisitive and that you care. Whereas if you don't do your research, it shows that you don't care. So I don't think that there's ever so much such thing. And by the way, there might be a thing where you read the news article and the person you're speaking with has no idea. And if that's the case, it doesn't make you look bad. They're going to be like, wow, I have to go double check on that because I didn't even realize that we just closed down that plant or something like that.
And I think doing research also brings up an important point that I didn't mention of that's important in the interview is asking questions at the end of the interview. How are you going to do that if you don't know about the company? Or you may ask a question that's right at the front of the website, and it's going to be a little embarrassing that you're asking very basic questions that really don't show your research. You're just asking it because you know that you have to ask questions at the end of interviews, as opposed to having real thorough or questions that you're going to gain value. Because when asking questions in interview, remember, two individuals or areas are being interviewed. The company is interviewing you and evaluating you, and you're evaluating that company. Just because they like you doesn't mean that you're going to say yes to their opportunity. You're evaluating to see if it's a good fit for you, just like they're trying to evaluate, are you a good fit for them?
And on top of that, I think this is the big key, because with that said, you might be thinking in the back of your mind, well, this is like company number 2 on my order of priorities, or this company's number 5 on my order of priorities. When you're in the interview, it shouldn't matter. They are your number 1 company. You should be acting like that. You should, I mean, don't get me wrong. You in the back of your mind, subconsciously, we're going to have our own internal list. But at the end of the day, don't put all your eggs in that number 1 basket. And on top of that, also treat it, when you're going to interview, treat it like as if that's your number 1 option. Because ultimately, if they don't feel like it's your number 1 option, they're not going to give you the offer. They want to feel like you want them just as badly as they want you.
Absolutely. They're the number 1. At that moment, they're the number 1, and you're just trying to put your best foot forward and turn your excitement for that opportunity.
Yeah, no, that's great. So let's talk about resumes for a minute. I would love to learn, what are your thoughts on resumes? How can students go about putting their best foot forward and making the best impact on their resume?
Awesome. And so my advice on resumes, and some people might be a little discouraged because my approach is more work, because I don't think that one resume should cover all. It shouldn't be a cookie cutter approach. Every resume should be targeted towards the company and the position you're applying for. Now, so if you, let's say, apply to a marketing assistant position, you gear your resume towards that position, that organization, great. You apply to another marketing assistant. You're thinking, I'll use the same thing. But there might be little tweaks on that job that you need to tweak yourself. Also, if I'm using on the company, the company on their job description is using the word advocate. You're going to advocate for clients. And then you on your document for a previous job is talking about how you helped clients. I would make that little switch from help to advocate. And some people are thinking, well, that's a little silly. Why do I have to make it so targeted? Because let's talk about what we know about resumes. Companies read them for 15 seconds, sometimes less. That's like someone handing you a flyer on the way to your car at the parking lot, and you're going to glance at it by the time you get to your car. What's going to make you keep that flyer and go into your car? You need to get their attention. And there's no guarantee of what they're going to read on the resume. However, if all of your action words and all of your skill sets and everything that you're mentioning is geared to what they're looking for, it doesn't matter what part of the document they're going to read or glance over. Everything is screaming, hey, I'm the right fit, and this is why. We've also entered a world where many of these companies are using these keyword searches to make sure are the words you're using aligned with the words that they need. And you'd be surprised the reason that they're using those words on those job description is probably the words that hiring manager likes to use. And so if you're already aligning it that way, let's know this. The resume doesn't get us the job. The interview does. However, that resume is that first gatekeeper. So what you want to make sure is if you've made your document targeted enough, connecting the dots enough as to your fit and that you can handle the job, that's half the battle. Many people struggle because they just want to click and apply. So by having it targeted, you've already kind of filtered out to being one of the top candidates in that pool. And you're going to get, all you want to do is get that chance for that interview. Give me an opportunity to sell myself, because the resume doesn't sell yourself. It's a marketing tool. It just needs to market you enough to get that opportunity that you can have that sales pitch. And so, yes, that extra, I tell students all the time, like, hey, make it more targeted. But they're like, yeah, but I have to apply to 20 jobs tonight. That's going to take me forever. And I'm like, would you rather have spent those extra 10 to 15 minutes making it more targeted and getting a call, or not spending those 15 minutes and now spending an extra month job searching? And so sometimes thinking of it like that in terms of the easier path, but really making it targeted, using the keywords. And I can't emphasize this enough, making the document clean to read. Easy to read left to right. Things aren't crunched together. You're not bolding everything. In my opinion, if you're bolding, it's primary information. If you're italicizing, it's secondary. You're using underlining and capitalization for your headings to be more like guide points. I never understood bolding section headings because, in my opinion, they should be guiding me. If I'm only spending 15 seconds and you're bolding the heading, I'm now spending more time than I needed to on it. I want to skim through it. I want to read through it. And so it's important to have those keywords, those strategic styling techniques, and targeted headings. So many times students are applying to a job. Let's say they're in the finance industry, and everything they've done up to that point, internships, jobs, what have you, have been in finance. Why are you listing all those experiences in section heading called professional experience or work history? Again, that's assuming that reader of your resume is going to read each of your experience and then say, wow, this person has a lot of finance experience, as opposed to you having a section heading called finance experience or finance and management experience. Yes, it's professional experience, but now you've already, in that 2 seconds that they read your section heading, they may have been invited to read more. Oh, finance, we're looking for that. Let me read more. It's inviting the reader to already have some information. If they read professional experience, they don't have any new information. They're expecting you to have professional experience, but by you making it targeting, it's already giving them a heads up as to what types of experiences you're coming from.
Yeah, I love that. And I think one thing, just like to even add to that, we talked about this the last couple of nights, is that most companies use automated word recognition systems and softwares now. So if you don't have that advocate, or if you don't have those keywords in it, you're just going to get filtered out. It's going to go from 15 seconds per resume to 0 seconds. And I love that tip that you had about boldening the keywords, not the section titles. That's gold. That's something that is a great piece of advice, because so often our eyes are going to go literally immediately to the things that are drawing us to them. And if we're drawing our attention to section headers, everybody's got a section header. That's not unique. That's not different about your resume. So I think that idea of boldening the key points or the key stat or the key component to your resume is crucial to getting somebody to really see what you have to offer.
Absolutely. And the thing I didn't mention, which is very important, is your bullet points. Your bullet points need to start with action verbs. It shouldn't just be one bullet that says responsibilities included and then a laundry list of responsibilities. You need to use action verbs that highlight or insinuate certain skills, address, problem solving, all these different action verbs that really tell you the skill set, and then give me the details, quantify it. I always say you got to find a balance between not being too wordy, but also not being too generic where you're really not just telling me anything. And so I'm not just going to buy in, just like an interview. I'm not just going to buy in because you wrote on a bullet point management skills. How did you manage? How many people did you manage? How did you approach your management skills? How did you assess your teams? These all could be separate bullet points, but are you giving me the quantifiable measures that tell me how you your input led to a certain output?
Yeah. And so Nicole asked the question, is it wise to have 2 pages of the resume when applying for internships / jobs? My advice is no. You want to keep it short. You want to keep it sweet. You want to keep it brief. Now, quick caveat, if you're applying for a PhD program or a higher ed program, yeah, a whole CV is required. You want to have multiple pages listing out all of your experiences and the things that you've done. But when it comes to a job or an internship, keep it to 1 page and cater that resume to the job itself. What do you think, Emilio?
Absolutely. A 1-page document, depending on the industry, is most important. If you're going to grad school, more. But if you're going for an internship, 1-page document. And if you're saying, but I have all these relevant experience, going to the 2nd page, my thing would say you're not formatting it right. Your margins need to be at a 0.5 all around. Spread things out. Make it easier to read. Also, if your section headings, let's say, are an 11-point font, put the content underneath that at a 10-point font. Make sure that it's easy to read, but you can fit a lot more. Even the space between experiences, put your cursor on it. Right now, it's probably at a 12. You could switch that to a 6 or an 8, and it's empty space that is not going to necessarily hurt the readability of the document, because that's something you got to keep in mind. Am I keeping it to 1 page and keeping that readability strong? But there's a lot of strategies. Most times that I see a resume out of 2 or 3 pages, it's because the individual's not formatting right and is not targeting it correctly. But there's a lot of little tricks and tips and tricks you can do to get that formatting down to 1 page, but easy to read for the employer.
That's an interesting point. I don't know if I fully agree with all of that. And just respectfully, I think
Absolutely.
when it comes to the resume, I definitely think formatting properly is key. But I think if you're getting to, if you're going down from 11-point font to 10-point font so you can get more words in there, I think it can come off as potentially smushing more things together, and it does detract from that readability. I think, at least in my opinion, is that if you can keep it to short and sweet but clear bullets of exactly what you did, very catered to the role itself, it might force you to cut off some of the weeds, some of the things, and it might make you have to look very hard and fast at what is the most important experiences I have relevant to this job. But I do believe that is crucial to getting the best readability from the resume. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, the scenario I was talking about was someone with a lot of relevant experiences. Obviously, you need to self-assess and make sure, is everything I'm including necessary? If you're applying to a finance opportunity and you're talking about your after-school daycare position, that's something that you might cut off. But you're right about consistency. And that's why I mentioned the section headings at 11, because the content should remain the same throughout your whole document. So if you have all of your content under your section headings at a 10 or a 10.5, keep that consistency. But your section headings can break those rules, just like your name at the top, because they're something that's almost setting up the section. And so that's where it might fluctuate to an 11. But you're right, Gary, you want to definitely keep consistency. You can't have some parts of your document at an 8, some at a 10, but as long as it's flowing right and all the information really did need to be included, because sometimes you have students or individuals who have done a ton of experiences in internships that do relate back. In their previous job before that, they were working in the industry, and they've been working in that same company for so long and have had so many different roles, and it's hard to cut that down. That's when we need to work on the formatting and style, because everything is relevant, but it needs to be catered in a way that it is going to be read. So I know sometimes without a visible example, giving it out right now to showcase it, but I think both of us have the right point. It needs to be consistent. It needs to be easy to read. You can't include everything, and you can't just mess with formatting because you want to include everything. You got to mess with formatting when you want to include something that is relevant. And right now you don't have the space to include it, but it is relevant to the job opportunity.
Yeah. Well, let's transition. Let's talk about cover letters. What is the purpose of a cover letter?
So a cover letter isn't just to restate your resume. We just talked about a resume gets us the interview. So that tells us that the interview and your answers to those interview questions are the kind of the key evaluation to determine if you're going to get the job. So why not have a cover letter that's treated almost as the pre-interview that allows you to connect the dots to the reader as to your fit, as to your excitement for the position. Nowhere on your resume are you able to say, hey, I'm excited to work for Google because of X, Y, and Z. You might have a bullet point talking about your analytical skills, but you can't exactly follow up that bullet point and apply that skill set to how it's going to be used in that job. That's where a cover letter comes in. A cover letter can provide an avenue to tell you, I'm excited about this opportunity because it's going to give me an avenue to develop in X, Y, and Z areas. I'm excited about your company because of the values, including X, Y, and Z. In your cover letter, I'm a big fan of telling them, hey, this is what you need. This is why you need it, and this is how I have it. So if you say, I understand that to be a successful junior analyst, you must have strong attention to detail skills, a strong understanding on the finance industry, and an ability to use technology skills in a variety of settings. You said a lot there. But following it up as to why that's important, Garrett, did I lose you there? Garrett, I think we froze. Garrett?
Oh, we're good. No, we're good. We're here.
Oh, perfect, because I didn't hear you there. So, I think it's important that you tell them, hey, this is what you need, but then explain why you need it. Like, why are those skills so valuable that you have that need to be applied in setting? Because then it's setting up, you're telling them, hey, this is what you need. This is why you need it. And then after that, you could back it up with examples like, these are all skills that I have developed through previous experiences. For example, when working at X, Y, and Z, I had to apply those same skill sets in these settings. And this is how it's going to be easily transferred within the setting that you're looking for. But I think the cover letter is the ideal place to be able to explain your fit, to be able to connect the dots, that you have a good handle as to not just what the position entails, but what are the skills as you read between the lines in terms of the tasks that they're saying in the job description, how you are applying bullet points or things that you've done in other jobs to the specifics of what this job entails. But again, it allows you to also show excitement. It allows you also to maybe highlight certain gaps of employment or why you're a good fit, especially if you're transitioning from one industry to another. But again, it's all about connecting the dots and treating it almost as the pre-interview.
Sorry about that. Hey, Emilio, are you there?
Yeah.
Perfect. Sorry about that. I had a slight technical difficulty, but we're back on. Sorry about that, everybody. So yes, I think that was a great point that you made about cover letters. I believe that when it comes to your cover letter, you are selling your potential. So when I say you're selling your potential, you're talking about what you can accomplish for this company. Because I mean, as a 22-year-old student, you're not expected to be an expert in the field. You are not expected to be someone who's coming in ready to like already have 5, 6, 7, 10 years experience. You're selling your potential about what you can accomplish in your future. So I think that's something that's really key to I guess acknowledge for the cover letter. And it should be like 2 to 3 paragraphs long, very brief.
Yeah, absolutely. Two paragraphs. Depending how you set it up, maybe you have a smaller body paragraph that's focused on your skills and fit. And the next paragraph could be about potentially why you want to work in that culture. Like, for example, companies like Google's sometimes care a little bit more on your culture fit than necessarily like all the skills which they've highlighted on your resume already.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really great point. So let's talk a little bit. By the way, it is 8:45. So students, if you got any questions, please post them in the comment section. We will get to them in just a moment. But yeah, what I wanted to ask was a little bit more about the interview process. So let's say I'm in the process of interviewing for a role and I get an offer, but I'm still waiting to hear back from a couple other companies.
Yeah.
What do you suggest that I do to, I guess, kind of handle that situation?
Yeah. So, it's funny. I get that question a lot, and including from my own family when they're going the job search. So I think it's important to be a little bit, communicate with that initial company. So if that company, let's say, makes you an offer, they give you an offer on Wednesday. They're like, Miller, we sent you an offer. We think you're a great fit. We'd love to have you on board. Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm going to evaluate. Now, they want an answer maybe by Friday, or they're telling you a deadline. We want an answer by Friday. Now, that other company, you're still waiting. Now, if you haven't even interviewed that company, that's something that you're going to probably have to make a decision, because you're not going to be able to make that company wait so long. But if you've already gone through your final interview, you still haven't heard back from them, you're going to do two things. You're going to contact that company that made you that offer, be like, this is a great offer. I'm super excited. I'm still need to speak it over with my family. Would it be okay if I gave you an answer next Tuesday? See if there's a wiggle room on the deadline. And then that company's like, you know what? Take the weekend. Let us know sometime early next week. Perfect. Go to that second company that hasn't made you an offer and let them know and be honest with them. Like, hey, I'm reaching out. It was great interviewing with you. I got to be honest with you that you're my top company of choice. I really can't wait for this opportunity. Unfortunately, I want to let you know that I did receive another offer, and I don't want to speed up your process. But again, I would love for the opportunity to work for your organization. And if it's possible to find out the timeline that you're looking to make an offer, that would be great. But again, thank you again for the opportunity. All the best. Now,
yeah, I think that's a really good piece of insight. I think that's a really good way of handling that. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think you want to communicate. I think really it's all about, you want to learn about what the timeline is for the company that you're waiting to hear back from.
Exactly.
And I believe that once you get that offer and you ask for a little bit of extra time waiting for, let's say, Tuesday to come back with a response, I think you immediately call the other companies that you're interviewing with and you're waiting to hear back from to say, hey, I want to follow up to see what the process might look like, when a decision might be made, that sort of thing. And, you can go, I think the way that you handled that, Emilio, was perfect. I think that gives some really good insight. But I also believe that, yeah, it's really all about just being clear with your communication. And then you may have to come down to making a decision. And you may end up declining the original offer you get, not getting the next offer. But I can promise you it's not the end of the world.
Absolutely. But I think it's how you communicate. If you want to disclose you made an offer, some people choose or not. But I think it's especially stating, I'm not trying to speed up your process at all. And just restating all the wonderful things that drawing you to that company why they're your number one choice. And trust me, that company, if you're in the final process and they really love you, they're not going to want to lose you. And they may be dealing with things that, because every organization and industry is different, and they may have not gotten to the point of making that offer, but they want to let you know, hey, we're going to let you know by Friday. So I think it's important to communicate, because worst case, they tell you, unfortunately, we're still going through the process. We aren't going to make a decision until the next 2 weeks. Okay. Or they might say our head manager is out. We can't make any decisions for the next few weeks. That tells you right there, what are you willing to do? Are you willing to take the risk and reject that other company for what could be with this company? Because I'm a big believer that if you do make a commitment to that original company, like the situation arises where that company offers you, that other company is not going to make a decision for a few weeks, and that. So you're like, you know what? I don't want to lose this great offer. Even though they're my second choice, they're still a great company and I want them. I'm going to accept it. 2 weeks later, that other company is like, hey, Milo, we actually are going to make you an offer. You can't go back to that other company and be like, now I'm going to reject. To me, your personal brand and integrity goes a long way. And you'd be surprised how small industries are. And that company finds out, or how you went about this process in the unethical way, your commitment and your word to me is a very important thing that gets lost in today's time. And if you say yes or make a commitment that you're going to start that company, I think you got to see that through. Even if that other company is like that grand big opportunity and you decide, you know what, I am going to burn some bridges, just know what that entails and be willing to take on the consequences of you burned bridges that are never going to be able to be rebuilt again.
You know, I've even seen people do this before where they accepted an offer, got another offer, and then decided to revoke the initial offer to accept the new offer. And they didn't even realize that both companies knew each other and immediately contacted them. The other company revoked the initial offer. The person was without offers and was blackballed across the industry. Yep. So I recognize the importance of, if you accept an offer, like, you stick to it, you see it through. Now, I mean, I just watched a video from Gary Vaynerchuk earlier today, which I thought was pretty relevant on to the subject. And that was, if you recognize within the first 2 months that this is just not the right fit for you, this is a company that's not the right fit for you, I'm giving you permission. I'm telling you, it's okay to say, hey, I just don't think this is the right fit. Because so often I'll see people and they will stick with the job for 2 to 3 years that they knew immediately that it wasn't going to be a right fit for, but they stuck with it because they were afraid of having a gap on their resume. I think in today's society, we are more understanding of something like that. And so I think if you're self-aware enough to recognize, like, hey, I don't know if this is the right fit, they're going to be happy that, like, you nipped it in the bud right now, as opposed to waiting. What do you think?
Absolutely. I think you got to find that right timeline. You mentioned a pretty good timeline, 1 to 2 months, because I think once you get into that 7 month, 8 month, you're kind of in that middle of the river type, and you now have a pretty large gap, or almost a year of that you'd be, because I think it's a red flag on your resume that you see you're on an organization for 7 months. If you were only there for 2 months, you might not even want to list it. You might be focusing on your most recent experience, because they are going to be asking you about that. Like, hey, what happened here? And it's okay to be honest that it wasn't a good fit. But I think leaving an organization after 8 months, to me, is a big red flag. Leaving after 2 months, it's as if you just left the job search and you're jumping right back into it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally. Well, to transition a little bit, one thing that I'm really fascinated by is behavioral psychology and the way people perceive things in the interview process. And one thing that one person I'm a huge fan of is Dr. Robert Cialdini, and he wrote a book called Persuasion. One of the things that he recommends in his book is, when you go and do an interview, one thing that he talks about is the importance of changing somebody else's state. Because what often happens is an interviewer will set up like interview after interview after interview after interview. And so they're just kind of going through the motions where they're looking for nitpicky things to, like, throw you out. So what you can do to get yourself and allow yourself to stick with them is you can actually change their state. So one thing that he recommends is that when you go into the interview, immediately, like, you say this, you say, hey, thank you so much for taking the time to interview with me today. I'm sure that you've got a lot of questions for me, but before we get started, I was hoping that I could ask you a question. And then you say, yeah, sure, shoot. And you say, why did you decide to offer me the opportunity to interview with you today? Boom, just like leave it at that. Yeah. And now what that does is 2 things. One, from a state perspective, it gets them thinking about all the positive things about why they wanted to interview you. So maybe they say, hey, we really like that internship experience you had and that volunteer experience you had, but maybe that part-time job that you had, they didn't talk about. Okay, great. And it forces them to think about you in a positive light, about what redeeming qualities you have, changing their state. The other thing that it does is it gives you a roadmap for how to answer the questions later on in the interview. So if they ask you, like, hey, tell us about a time that you faced some adversity, don't talk about the part-time job, because they never mentioned that. Talk about the internship or the volunteer experience, because they said that that's what they really enjoyed about your resume. What do you think about that, Emilio?
I think it could work for some industries. I think some, you got to feel out the room, because you're going to be some industries, including accounting. Sometimes you're dealing with some old school folks and they're going to want to be in charge of the process. But I definitely could see in a lot of organization that being a great strategy to employ. But I think you got to be able to pick up on the room, and your delivery needs to be on point with that. Especially if you're asking that question and there's, let's say, a panel of individuals that are going to interview you. You got to make sure that it doesn't take away from the interview experience. But again, every organization is different. I've seen that happen in interviews I've been a part of, and it's actually been welcoming to give that candidate some insights on that. And I could feel from their energy, they're just that person. Also, it might be a position where feedback is really important, and you can kind of see someone that's already starting it off like that is setting the tone for it. But I think it's really important to pick up on what industry you're getting into, because for some, I could see it not working as well in some of the more traditional, like business, corporate America industries.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's a really good point. So Anthony asked a question: if you've accepted an offer, how much should you communicate with the company between accepting and starting, especially if that period is several months? So that's a great question. I think
Yeah.
this is a question that a lot of students go through. So for example, you get an offer in September, October, November, but you don't start till May or June. How much should you be communicating with them?
Yeah, well, I think depending if you're working with the recruiter or hiring manager, I think how you talked about it, you mentioned 3 months you give an update to that person. I think it's important doing little check-ins every few months and be like, hey, I just want to let you know I'm so excited to start in this month. Let me know if there's anything I could prepare or read beforehand. Like, I think it's not just giving them an update, but seeing if there's anything you could do on your part to add value to them when you do start. I think that's going to do two things. A, you're going to know things that you could be doing to give yourself more confidence. But at that point, you're already giving that hiring manager an, we hired the right person. Look at this proactiveness this person is doing. There's not, as long as you're not doing it in a way that you're pestering the individual, you're being very much like a call to action. You're like, hey, what can I be doing? What can I be working on? And if they're telling you, no, you're all set. And then you could ask, like, perfect, would there be another time that we should check in before I start? Like, getting from them on how they want to be reached out to. But I think a lot of people are going to welcome. I know myself, I was managing someone, they told me that. I'll be like, look, how about this book? Take a look at it. Or I'm going to send you some documents of things on projects you may be working on before you get started.
That's awesome. No, that's a really good advice for that question. I think that makes a lot of sense. Is show your proactiveness, reach out, give them, ask for updates, ask if you can do things to prepare. And sometimes some companies may not actually give you that insight or that feedback. And sometimes it might, be up to you to be intuitive, like follow the lines. Maybe if their CEO posts a lot of content, or maybe has a book reading list that he or she has, and you can say, hey, this is something that I love reading. Boom, maybe start reading those books. I mean, I've seen that a few times. Like, you can do your own background research to help get yourself prepared for that type of situation. So, Emilio, one other question that I had was, what if I'm in the interview and it gets to the end of the interview, or the interview's over and I'm like, oh crap, I totally forgot this one part of the interview. How do I go about communicating that? Or how do I go about like interjecting that? Or do I do it at all?
So I think if the interview's over, what you need to do is use that as a part of your follow-up. Because after the interview, I think it's important to send thank you letters, thank you emails. And so you can include that in your thank you email. So let's say you met with someone, Garrett, thank you so much for interviewing me this afternoon. It was a great experience. I loved when you mentioned X, Y, and Z about your company. One thing I forgot to mention in my interview, which I feel would be a great value to your company, was blanket, 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 blank. Again, it was a wonderful experience. Let me know if you need anything in the next few weeks, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's I think a really good way of handling it, keeping it brief. You don't want to go too long. You don't want to write a whole essay in the email.
It should be no more than 2 sentences of something that you missed. Ideally 1 sentence, but 2 is acceptable. As long as it's a sandwich approach. You start with the thank you, you throw what mentioned, and it might even be the momentum of what was mentioned in the interview. And then you follow it up again as to what was excitement and kind of the next steps in it all.
Yeah. So one final question before we end this. This comes from Anya. She asked, what if in the interview they ask what your salary expectations are? How do you handle that question?
That's why you're always prepared for the salary question, even if you're not going to bring it up. So going to any interview, you should go to salary.com. You should go to the NACE salary calculator, Glassdoor. Have 3 to 4 research tools where you've done your homework, that even if you're not going to bring it up, if they ask you that question, you should do 2 things. Be like, I always say, the first time you get asked, you play a game of tennis and you hit it right back to them. So you'd be like, well, I've done my research, and based on my experience and, education, I do have a number in mind, but, I'm curious as to what you're looking to offer for this opportunity. Now, usually that organization will hit it right back to you and be like, well, we want to know your answer first. And so that's when you're going to give them a range. Well, like, based on my research, education, employment, I am looking anywhere from $50,000 to $56,000. At that point, you got to give them a number, but you want to make sure a couple of things: that your research is backing up what you're saying, that you have also are willing to take the lower end of that offer, because you can't just say, oh, 50 to 56, be like, you know what, we're actually looking at over 50, and be like, actually, I want 52. Be like, you're going to get that the negotiation, but make sure that the range you're giving is actually something you're comfortable taking.
That's a great tip. That was gold. That was a really, really good response to that question. I love that, Emilio. Well, thank you. Emilio, your advice was amazing. I'm really grateful to have you here tonight. I'm so glad the students could be here. Thank you, students, for being here tonight to attend this workshop. Though I just want to cover a couple final things before we end. One, remember your routine. Find a new accountability partner. Share with them 3 things that you've learned this past week and 1 new thing that you've done to help get yourself closer to landing that job or internship. Take a picture with that person, send it to either myself or Sydney. Alternatively, you can post on LinkedIn the things that you've learned. Tag us in it at Ambition in Motion. Then the other thing, the referral program. We've already opened up signups for next semester. I would love your help with encouraging fellow students to sign up and get involved with the program. And if you're enjoying your experience, if you wouldn't mind taking a video of yourself talking about your experience going through the program, I would love to learn your feedback. I'd love to learn how your experience is going. That would be extremely meaningful to me. So, Emilio, how can students find you? How can students get in touch with you?
Yeah, well, I work for Nova Southeastern University. You could always contact me. EL541@nova.edu. I do have my own private consulting business. So brilldeerbrandconsulting@gmail.com. I do presentations for organizations, but I also do private consulting on the side as well. So any of those emails, or find me on LinkedIn. We talked today about building your network. I'm now someone else that can be added to your network, and always happy to share insights, and provide guidance in necessary areas.
Amazing. Reach out to Emilio. Emilio, thank you so much for being here. Students, thank you so much for being here. This was awesome.
Awesome, Gary. Thank you so much for having me. It was great.
Of course, everybody have a wonderful rest of your